Hey everybody, this is Joe Joseph and this is the DailySheeple.com's Daily News Brief. I want to start off today by going to an article by investing.com. This is interesting because apparently there's been some rumors that have been circulating about Bashar al-Assad being assassinated. Well, this came out, it's a Reuters piece. Syrian government denies rumors of Assad being in poor health. It's very interesting. We have to see how this develops because you know that, first of all, clandestine operations have been going on for quite some time over in Syria with regards to the opposition movement, training and arming them. Of course, the United States was intimately involved in the formation of ISIS. Whether or not you want to call it blowback or you want to call it direct intervention, it doesn't matter. The fact is that ISIS now exists and we are directly responsible for it. I know a lot of Americans out there don't feel like we're responsible for it because, heck, we were never involved in any negotiations or anything like that. That was part of our government. But the government did it in our name. And as a result, we are dealing with a lot of backlash and consequences of being and intervening in business that is clearly not our own. But this says the Syrian government has denied rumors that President Bashar al-Assad is suffering from ill health, saying he was, quote, carrying out his quote, duties quite normally. Speculation swirled in recent days on social media as some Arab news websites saying Assad 51 was in critical condition, citing rumors of a stroke or that he'd even been shot. And Syrian government says the presidency denies all these reports. President Assad is in excellent health. Let me stop there because if we take a look at history, we can see many times where there was an assassination or perhaps a health crisis with a government or a leader where the actual event itself was covered up for quite some time. Here in the United States, we can look back to Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, of course, remained in the presidency throughout his 2 terms. However, for much of his second term, he was incapacitated due to a massive stroke. And actually, over the last couple of years of his presidency, his wife actually ran things. But no one wanted to say anything. Why? Because who was going to be the replacement? You know, who goes in the place of Wilson, who had all the agreements in place? Remember, Wilson was the one that allowed the Federal Reserve to come in. And I think a lot of his health issues was attributed to the guilt that he felt because, I mean, he sold this country out. Sold it out. But for the last 2.5 years or so of his presidency, he had no control over it. I mean, he was basically, an invalid. And so his wife ran things. Did anybody know about this? Not really. Not really, but they kept it hush-hush. This could be the same thing too, but you have to look at Bashar al-Assad, his relative youth being only 51 years old, and the fact that a lot of the information and propaganda that you see coming out of there is false. When you go into Syria, as a lot of independent reporters have, and a lot of independent observers have, you come to find out that everything that you're being told is not keeping in line with what's actually the truth. And then you start to look at what are the motivations towards wanting to get a Bashar al-Assad out of power, because the Syrian people actually like him. And life under Bashar al-Assad hasn't been that bad over in Syria. As a matter of fact, Syria was one of the last melting pots of the Middle East, where you had Christians and Muslims and everybody living in harmony alike. You had villages that still spoke Aramaic. I mean, that's their language. That's what they speak, Aramaic. Still to this day, up until recently. I don't know how many people are left because ISIS, the organization, quote unquote, that the U.S. helped to bring to power, has destroyed all that stuff. If what we're told in the mainstream media is any sort of truth, Yet we go about our daily lives and we don't feel any responsibility or guilt for this because it doesn't affect our daily lives. But how many lives has United States and UN foreign policy gone and destroyed the lives of millions of people? I mean, how many people? It's millions. Millions of people's lives have been affected. So, I mean, these are the things that when I see things like this is what I think of, because history tells you a different story. And there's probably more to this story. There's probably some truths there, and there's probably some deception. And only time will sort that out. So as it stands right now, the Syrian government denies rumors of Assad being in poor health. Now, President Trump here in the United States signed an executive order today to slash regulations. Now, this is good because we're just drowning in regulations. I'll bet you that half of those regulations haven't been enforced in quite some time, maybe old and antiquated, but just never been taken off the books. So Yahoo News is reporting that President Trump signed an order on Monday that will seek to dramatically pare back federal regulations by requiring agencies to cut 2 existing regulations for every new rule introduced. This will be the biggest such act that our country's ever seen. There will be regulation, there will be control, but it will be normalized control. This according to President Trump as he signed the order in the Oval Office. Trump's latest executive action will prepare a process for the White House to set an annual cap on the cost of new regulations. So not only are they going to limit, if you want to introduce a regulation, you better bring 2 to the table that you're taking off. And it's going to cost you. So let's make sure that the regulations that we're putting in place are smart and worth the cost. Seems like some common sense stuff to me. So let's see how the rest of FY17 goes. As it's been kind of the habit of Washington to just overregulate. So this could be a breath of fresh air. We'll have to see how this pans out. Now, Michael Snyder over at the Economics Collapse blog sees things very differently than perhaps the rosy way things are being portrayed by the Trump administration and by a lot of the alt media, because there is some good news, and we're not used to seeing good things come out of the White House, come out of the government, come out of any sort of propaganda news outlet. And so we're seeing some action at the Oval Office, at the White House, and that's got everybody feeling upbeat. Michael Snyder, though, says things are exploding in a way America has never seen. He says this is the precipice of civil unrest. Very interesting. Over at SHTF Plan, there was an editor's note, and they basically said just how explosive the reaction over President Trump's executive order will become have yet to be seen, but it's clear that an already divided atmosphere is becoming even more contentious and chaotic. Let's not forget that a lot of that tension comes from the fact that you have agent provocateurs with deep pockets that are pushing a lot of this opposition. But it's still opposition, and it's still there. Whether or not it's funded, whether or not it's grassroots, doesn't make a difference. This is why it's so important to expose the George Soroses of the world and actually hold them to account before things get out of hand, and it's already way past getting out of hand. It says things will not become settled, but are likely to reach a point from which the nation cannot return. The cost of policy advances for a unilateral pen stroke may prove great indeed, and the fabric of the nation threatens to unwind. How close are we to unrest, to riots? Let's see what Michael Snyder says. He says, it doesn't take much of a trigger to push extremely large crowds of very angry protesters into committing acts of riots and violence. And rioting and violence can ultimately lead to widespread civil unrest and calls for revolution. The election of Donald Trump was perhaps the single most galvanizing moment for the radical left in modern American history, And we've already seen that a single move by Trump can literally cause protests to erupt from coast to coast within 48 hours. On Friday, Trump signed an executive order that banned refugees from Syria indefinitely and that placed a 90-day ban on travel to the United States for citizens of Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. And within hours, protesters began to storm major airports. And by Sunday, very large crowds were taken to the streets all over the country. And so as Michael was going through the articles about these protests, he says, I remember one woman holding up a sign that said, remove Trump by any means necessary. Let's think about that for a second, okay? Here we are in a constitutional republic where we have supposed laws that apply and are applicable to everybody from the top on down. But because the United States, it's been kind of it's a mass effort by the powers that shouldn't be. You want to dumb down the populace so that they don't know and cannot hold the people in charge to account. It's quite simple. We want a bunch of 9-to-5 drones. That's what the public school system was designed to do. It's designed to get people into and develop habits. And in this case, it's when the bell rings, you go here, like a little rat. When the bell rings, you go here. Do this, do that. Do as you're instructed. Do as you're told. You know, humans aren't wired to learn that way. To learn in a cinder block room and all be fed the same information and do the same thing. You know, this homogenized curriculum. And so what happens? You don't get people that live up to their potential. You snuff out the Nikola Teslas and the Thomas Edisons of our day because you force them down a road where their brain doesn't naturally gravitate to. So you got that. And then you have, you know, your crooked politicians that over time sell their souls for pennies on the dollar to these mega corporations and these special interests, these George Soroses, these Koch brothers. We can name them on and on and on. That because the people aren't looking, because they don't know the rules, they don't know the law. And when I say the law, I mean the Constitution. I don't mean statutes or anything like that. I'm talking the law, the supreme law of the land. Because they don't know it, they can say things like, remove Trump by any means necessary. I'm sure there's a lot of people that felt that way about Chairman Obama. But I didn't see that happen. But it doesn't take much imagination to figure out what that person was suggesting. Michael writes, visions of violence are dancing in the heads of these very frustrated people, and they're being egged on by top members of Congress, including people like Senator Chuck Schumer, who said this, quote, these orders go against what America has been about, Schumer told the crowd in a Battery Park news conference. The order made us less humanitarian, less safe, less American, and when it comes to making us less safe for people, forget this. That's why so many of our military, intelligence, security, and law enforcement leaders are opposed to this order, and all those like it. You know, when I look and I talk to people that possess critical thinking skills, right? If you're going to maintain a nationalist viewpoint and blueprint, if we're going to have borders, then you have to have order in how people transit to and from the country. That's what immigration laws are for, right? There are a lot of people that had to go and jump through a lot of hoops in order to become U.S. citizens. Hell, in order just to get here. You know, try and get a work visa from a place like Scotland and then to come to the United States. And then go to, like, I don't know, a different country, one that the U.S. is trying to pull people in from, say like Syria under Obama. You get it instantaneously. While The guy from Scotland may have to be on a 2-year waiting list. It is the most corrupt practice I think I have ever seen. And instead of just willy-nilly following the law whenever a president or whenever a Congress or whenever a bureaucrat sees fit, it should be followed all the time because it's the law of the land, right? That doesn't happen. And so you go across the board and you find out, wow, man, look at this. No one gives a crap about the law. You know, a lot of people say they wouldn't want to live in an anarchy. But I say that we kind of already do. Because how is there law if the law doesn't apply to the very top all the way down to the very bottom? And if the law isn't applied equally, equal justice under the law, just as our Supreme Court building says on its facade, then how can you respect the law? So here in the United States, we have a very serious problem, a crisis, if you will, because you have the people in Congress, you have bureaucrats, you have corporatists, you have oligarchs that somehow find that they're above the law and get away with murder, while all of us down here, the peasants with the pitchforks and the torches, you know, we get massacred if we violate the law. You know, mandatory minimum sentences for, say, drug crimes, right? In some states, while you go look at Congress, you're telling me that they don't do drugs? Look at some of the stuff coming out of Congress. They got them all, they're all druggies. It's unbelievable. But, you know, it is the way it is. So how do we, the people, respect a law if it doesn't apply from the top on down? That's what makes all of this stuff, you know, Chuck Schumer coming out in tears. Ooh, that's what makes it all just, it's all theater. It's all propaganda. It's all to get the people to dance. They're pulling the strings and we dance. And really what we should be doing is just not participating, not consenting. You know, if you want to do things to make a difference, and I've always said this, you know, tax dissent is probably the best way you can elicit a response as fast as humanly possible. The only problem is you have to get people on board with it. And a lot of people are very afraid to take the plunge because you'd need a lot of people to do it at the same time to overwhelm the system. And so why not take your taxes? And instead of sending them to the bagmen of the state, you put them in escrow and say, you know, what this country is doing is illegal. It's not lawful. And it violates the very values and virtues on which this country was founded upon. And I cannot, in good conscience, fund that effort. So until the government comes in line and follows the law, your money's over here collecting interest. Okay? It'll be here for you. So it's not that I'm not paying it. It's right there. You know, what would end up happening, though, is the IRS would go and seize your money, right? Because that's the way it works. It is perceived freedom with a jackboot on your neck. And that's what it is. We dance. They pull the strings. In other news, this is interesting. I want to go science real quick because I think this is a fascinating piece. And it's something that I'm going to get into a little more in future news briefs. Earth's magnetic poles are set to swap places and we're totally unprepared. Oh, this is, a lot of people out there have heard that the poles are shifting, and they are, and I guess they're accelerating in the shift, and also the magnetic field itself is weakening. So, and it's weakening faster and faster. That's the problem. So how long before this becomes a crisis? Well, ScienceAlert.com says Earth's magnetic field surrounds our planet like an invisible force field, protecting life from harmful solar radiation by deflecting charged particles away. Far from being constant, this field is continuously changing. And indeed, our planet's history includes at least several hundred global magnetic reversals where north and south magnetic poles swap places. So they asked the question, when is the next one happening and how will it affect the Earth? It says during a magnetic reversal, the magnetic field won't be zero, but will assume a much weaker and much more complex form. It may fall to 10% of the present-day strength and have magnetic poles at the equator, or even the simultaneous existence of multiple north and south magnetic poles. Geomagnetic reversal, of course, occurs a few times every million years on average. However, the interval between reversals is very irregular and can range up to tens of millions of years. Let me stop there. You can go and look at the geological record and see just where the poles used to be and where they have transited from. So the one thing that a lot of people are talking about is, will it cause a power cut or will it cause a mass extinction? And the fact is, folks, nobody knows. But one thing is for certain, that the Earth is changing and global warming is not the issue. I'm Joe Joseph. This was the DailySheeple.com Daily News Brief. Have a great day, everybody. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out our website, thedailysheeple.com, and have a pleasant day. Take care.